The translator bead in my ear kept glitching. That was the first sign the day was not going to go smoothly. I stood at the altar of the grand convocation hall of Valdis Prime, wearing my dead father's cufflinks and a suit tailored by someone who had clearly never seen a human body before. The collar was too tight. The sleeves were too long. I looked like a child wearing a table covering. There were 412 guests seated in front of me. I counted them. Not because I was nervous. I count things, rooms, exits, people, structural load points. I have done it since I was 9 years old. My mother thought it was a disorder. My first boss said it made me the best relay station mechanic he had ever hired. The truth was somewhere in the middle, leaning heavily toward the mechanic. I counted the guests because counting settled me. And because 360 of those guests were Valdisi, blue-skinned, long-fingered, dressed in ceremonial silks that cost more than my childhood home, and every single one of them was watching me the way you watch something that has wandered into the wrong habitat. Not with anger, with patience. The patience of people who measure time in centuries and understand that most things, if you simply wait long enough, correct themselves. The music started. It was not music I recognized. It moved like water finding cracks in stone. My translator bead went silent, not glitching this time, just overtaken. Whatever that sound was, it did not need translation. Then Sarah came in. I am not going to describe her. I would do it wrong. What I will tell you is that every rational thought I had organized carefully in my head during the 43 minutes I stood at that altar became largely unavailable to me when she walked through that door. She walked like she owned the gravity in the room. She probably did. I heard Owen, standing 2 rows back, exhale with the tone of a man who has just accepted something he cannot argue with. Good, I had felt that way for 2 years. The ceremony was long. My collar kept tightening, or maybe that was just me. The Valdisi officiant recited the binding lineage covenant in 4 different dialects, 3 of which I understood better than anyone in that room knew. I had learned them quietly, the way I learned most things, by being present, by listening, by never announcing what I had absorbed. Sarah's hand found mine during the 3rd dialect. Something shifted, not emotional, physical, like a joint moving back into alignment after a long time out of place. My translator bead went dark for exactly 3 seconds. Across the hall, 2 sensor drones registered an equipment anomaly and quietly flagged it for later review. Nobody mentioned it. Sarah's mother was seated in the front row, center, matriarch Theva of the Valdisi first house. She had the look of someone who had already decided the ending of this story and was attending purely for the formality of watching it begin. I smiled at her. She did not smile back. The reception was held in the orbital gardens, glass and open sky, and something that passed for flowers among species that had evolved under 3 suns. I stood with a drink I was not going to finish and watched 412 people navigate whether or not to speak to me. Most chose not. Owen found me by the centerpiece arrangement that looked like it was made of frozen lightning. He handed me a second drink. "You doing all right?" he asked. "It was a good ceremony," I said. "That is not what I asked." "I know," I said. We stood there in the way that old friends stand when there is nothing useful left to say. Matriarch Theva arrived at my left side without sound. She had the height of someone whose species had evolved in low gravity, tall, thin, angular in a way that read as sharp even when she was still. She leaned toward me with the careful movement of someone making a private remark in a public space. She spoke in Old Valdisi, 3rd dialect, the one reserved for internal family matters. "Enjoy the warmth while it lasts, little mammal. She will outlive you by 4 centuries. You are a season." Owen did not react. His translator bead would have caught none of that. The 3rd dialect was not in the standard civilian database. I turned and looked at Matriarch Theva. I raised my glass. Then I had better make it a good one, I said, in perfect third dialect. Something moved behind her eyes. Not anger, not surprise, something older than both. She walked away. Owen looked at me. What did she say? She said I looked good in the suit. She absolutely did not say that. No, I agreed, she did not. Sarah found me an hour later near the edge of the glass garden where the stars were actually visible. She touched my arm and I turned, and the whole situation, the 400 guests, the translator bead, the collar, the matriarch, reduced itself to background noise. She asked if I was tired. I said I was not. She said the matriarch had mentioned our conversation. I said the matriarch had interesting opinions. Sarah's expression did something complicated for a moment, and then she laughed, and her laugh was the specific sound of someone who had chosen to stop holding something carefully and just set it down. My translator bead, dead in my ear, had not taught me her language. She had. Later, when the guests had thinned and the music had dropped to something low and simple, she touched the scar on my collarbone, the one that runs from my left shoulder to the center of my chest, the one I have had since I was 16. What made this? She asked. I covered her hand with mine. Hell of a thing, I said. Long story, I will tell you when it matters. She did not push. She was not that kind of person. And I was glad for it because the truth was not a story I was ready to tell. Not yet. Not when I still did not fully understand it myself. 2 sensor drones on the other side of the orbital gardens completed their diagnostic reports that night. Both listed the same anomaly. Both listed it as equipment error. Both were wrong. 3 years. That is how long it takes to understand someone's habits well enough to know when they are hiding something. Sarah hid things the way all careful people hide things, by being entirely present, by being warm and specific and asking the right questions, and filling every conversation so completely that there was no space left for the things she was not saying. I noticed it on a Tuesday. She had reorganized the coffee station again. That was not the tell. The tell was that she had reorganized it in a way that made my mornings easier, moved the filter I always forgot to my eye level, set the grind to the setting I preferred. Small adjustments. The kind of adjustments you make for someone when you feel guilty about something. I said nothing. I kept my eyes open. We had built a good life on the Relay 7 residential platform. I ran maintenance contracts on deep space signal repeaters, the unglamorous backbone of interstellar communication. Nobody celebrated relay mechanics. Nobody wrote songs about the people who kept the grid alive. We worked and nobody noticed until we stopped. That suited me fine. Sarah was rising in the Valdesi diplomatic corps. She was good at it, patient, precise, capable of speaking to anyone across any cultural gap without making them feel like a translation problem. She got that from somewhere I never asked about. We argued about dishes, about the temperature of the sleeping quarters, about whether Owen was staying too many nights in the guest room. We had a running disagreement about a particular ceiling panel in the kitchen that I kept saying needed replacing, and she kept saying was fine. The ceiling panel was not fine, but she liked being right about small things. I let her have them. It was a good life. The kind of good that you do not notice until you are standing at the edge of losing it. The Queen's seal arrived on a Wednesday. I was 3 hours into a pressure line diagnostic on Relay Station 4 Gamma when my comm buzzed with Sarah's identification code, 2 short pulses, which meant not urgent, call when available. I called when I got back. She told me about the seal. Her voice was even, controlled. She had the tone of someone reading from a document they had already processed privately and were now presenting in summarized form. The Valdesi Eternal Court had summoned her for a review, nothing more. I said, okay. She said, I want you to keep working. It will probably take a week. I said, "When do you leave?" She said, "3 days." I went back to the pressure line diagnostic. I finished it. I filed the report. I ate something I do not remember eating, and then I sat in the station's observation bay and watched the signal pulses blink across the relay grid. Sarah was a third daughter of the Valdesi first house. Review summons did not go to third daughters. They went to primary heirs, to policymakers, to individuals whose choices had diplomatic consequences. Third daughters did not get summons unless the court had decided they had become a diplomatic consequence themselves. I thought about the matriarch at the wedding, her patience, her certainty. I was a season. I filed that thought away and went home. She had dinner ready. She had found a way to make the noodle soup I liked from my childhood using ingredients that technically did not include any of the original components. It tasted exactly right. How she had worked that out was a mystery I had stopped trying to solve. We ate, we talked about the ceiling panel. She won again. I did not mention the summons. She did not mention it either. That night, while she slept, I sat at the small terminal in the side room where I kept my tools and work logs, and I ran the seal registration number through the public Valdesi court database. The entry was flagged restricted. That was normal. What was not normal was the secondary classification tag underneath the restriction flag. I had to look it up. It was not in the standard database. I found it in a legal archive, third-level indexing, Valdesi Court Procedures, Volume 12. The classification tag was the code for genetic lineage review proceedings. I read the definition twice. I closed the terminal. I went and looked at the ceiling panel in the kitchen for a long time. It needed replacing. I had always been right about that. I put the kettle on. While it heated, I pulled up the public record for the Valdesi Genetic Lineage Review Act, which had been passed 600 years ago and amended 4 times since. I read the relevant section. The relevant section used the word remediation 3 times. I turned the kettle off. I had not told Sarah I had been learning Valdesi legal dialect for the past 2 years. I had not told her because there had not been a reason to. I learned languages the same way I counted rooms quietly, steadily, without announcing it. Her voice was in every syllable. I had learned her language because she was in it, and I wanted to understand everything she was made of. Remediation, in Valdesi legal context, meant the removal of an element that had been found to be incompatible with the designated lineage path. I was the element. I sat at the kitchen table until the platform's artificial sun began its morning sequence. Then I went to the bedroom. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Sarah was asleep. She slept with both hands folded under her chin, which I had always thought made her look like someone who had figured out something the rest of the universe had not yet worked out. 3 years of watching her sleep had not made that impression go away. I went to the storage room and found my travel bag. I packed efficiently. I had a gift for it. I packed hers too. She found me in the side room 2 hours later, both bags by the door, me at the terminal running transit schedules for Valdesi Prime. She stood in the doorway. "You were not invited," she said. "I will be damned if that is going to stop me," I said. She was quiet for a long time. She looked at the bags, at the terminal screen, at me. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I found the classification tag last night." I meant about the language. I turned to look at her properly. She was not angry. She was looking at me with the expression of someone who has been trying to protect a thing and has just realized the thing was never as fragile as they thought. "Long enough," I said. She picked up her bag. "The transit departs in 4 hours," I said. "I know," she said. "Do you want breakfast first?" She considered it. "Yes," she said. I made the soup. She sat at the table. Neither of us mentioned the ceiling panel. We left together. Valdesi Prime Station, formerly designated Convocation Hub Alpha 7, was not a space station in any sense that the word implied modesty. It was the size of a small moon. It had 17 distinct atmospheric zones. The transit terminal alone covered more physical space than the entire city I had grown up in. I processed all of this the same way I processed every large system I walked into. Entry points, 42 visible, estimated 60 additional service access routes. Structural composition, Valdesi Trial, rated for centuries of continuous use. Emergency power routing, visible along the upper corridor lighting strips, which meant a disruption to primary power would take approximately 8 seconds to switch over. I was not planning anything. I never planned anything. I just kept files. Sarah walked beside me through the main transit corridor. She had her diplomat's face on, calm, composed, reading the environment without appearing to. We had that in common. Neither of us looked like we were collecting information. At the primary checkpoint, a Valdesi intake officer reviewed Sarah's summons seal and registered her transit entry. He was thorough, professional, and completely indifferent. He slid a second form across the counter without looking up. Accompanying dependent organism, he said. Non-citizen classification. Wristband required. He handed me a band. It was the pale gray color they issued to visiting livestock on agricultural transport manifests. I had read enough Valdesi administrative code to know that was not an accident. I put the wristband on. Sarah looked at my wrist. Something moved through her expression that she controlled before it finished forming. I have diplomatic status, she said. My spouse should be registered under. Diplomatic status applies to the summoned party, the officer said. He had the tone of someone reciting a document he had memorized before he could walk. Accompanying organisms are processed under standard visitor protocol. I touched Sarah's arm, once light. I am fine. She let it go. We were assigned an escort. Young officer, new insignia, the particular posture of someone trying to appear more certain than they were. He led us through the hub with efficiency and no conversation. I counted things. The hub had been built for Valdesi proportions, which meant the ceilings were high and the corridors were wide, and every surface had the angular precision of a species that found curves wasteful. There were other non-Valdesi visitors present, trade representatives, scientific delegates, a cluster of beings I did not recognize from any database I had access to. They all had wristbands. None of them were the same color as mine. We were taken to a waiting suite, not a cell. A proper suite with furniture, a view panel showing a rendered coastal landscape, and a refreshment console that included 3 options I recognized as human-compatible. That last detail was not accidental. Someone had prepared for my presence specifically. Sarah sat on the edge of the low seat near the view panel. I stood. I had not been able to sit properly since we boarded the transit, and there was no point pretending otherwise. They are going to separate us, she said. Probably, I said. When they do, I will be fine. Marcus. I will be fine, I said again. She looked at me with the look she reserved for when I was being difficult in a way she could not argue against. The escort returned 40 minutes later with 2 additional officers, senior insignia, the formal bearing of people conducting official procedure. They asked Sarah to come with them for the initial review session. Standard protocol. They did not ask me. I stood and walked toward the door. The escort stepped into the corridor to block the path, politely, firmly. The review session is for the summoned party only, he said. Then I will wait in the corridor, I said. You will wait in the suite. I will wait in the corridor. He looked at me. He looked at Sarah. He had the expression of someone who had a procedure for this situation and was calculating whether I was going to require it. Sir, he said, and put his hand on my shoulder. I do not know how to explain what happened next in a way that makes linear sense. My body moved, not dramatically, not with force. I shifted, the escort's hand was no longer on my shoulder, and the escort was on the floor. The lights in the corridor flickered. 3 of them died completely. Every comm badge in the immediate vicinity emitted a simultaneous burst of static. The escort's neural stunner, standard issue, powerful enough to drop a Valdesi in 2 seconds flat, was in his hand. He had fired it into my chest from half a meter away. I felt it, unpleasant, like the time I had accidentally grounded a live relay coupling without insulation gloves, the sensation of power moving through your body looking for somewhere to go. It did not find anywhere to go. It came back out. The stunner was a dead piece of metal in his hand. The lights came back on. I was standing exactly where I had been. The escort was on the floor, conscious, looking up at me with an expression that had no name in any of the 3 Valdesi dialects I had learned. Something between fear and recognition, something that had not existed before this moment. The 2 senior officers had not moved. They were looking at the readings on the monitoring device one of them was holding, the device that had been performing standard biometric scans since we entered the suite. One of them said something in rapid first dialect. I will not repeat the words. The tone is the point. The tone was the specific frequency of a trained professional who has just encountered a reading that is not supposed to exist. Sarah had not moved either. She was looking at me, not with fear, with something that looked uncomfortably close to recognition of her own. Marcus, she said, quiet level. I know, I said. What was? I know, I said again. I crouched down and checked that the escort was uninjured. He was. I helped him up. He let me, which said something about his character under pressure. Within 3 minutes, the suite had 6 additional officers in it. Within 8, a Valdesi physician arrived, took one look at the readings on the monitor, and left without filing any documentation. Within 20 minutes, Sarah and I had been separated. She went to the review hall. I went somewhere else entirely. I was alone now. For the first time since we left home, I was alone in a room with nothing to count except the same 4 walls and the thing living in my chest that had apparently been waiting a very long time for someone to give it a reason to come forward. I counted the walls. Then I started on the ceiling tiles. It was going to be a long wait. The containment room was clean. I want to be clear about that. No discomfort, no hostility, no dramatic lighting. It was a well-maintained, environmentally controlled room with a comfortable seat, a water source, and a view panel displaying a calming rendered image of a coastal landscape from a planet I had never visited. Someone had designed this room to manage something they were not sure how to categorize. That told me more than the room itself. I counted the ceiling tiles, 48, the floor panels, 36, the ventilation grills, 6, with a 7th partially concealed behind the view panel mounting. The room had 3 recording points that were visible and almost certainly 2 that were not. I sat. I drank the water. I waited. A Valdesi scientist arrived after approximately an hour. She introduced herself as Dr. Venrel, Senior Analyst, Biological Classification Division. She had the careful professional warmth of someone who had been briefed to be non-threatening. She wore no rank insignia I could read as military. She asked if she could run some scans. I said yes. She ran scans for a long time. She ran them twice. She left without saying anything. A second scientist arrived. Male, older, with the particular stillness of someone at the top of a field who no longer needed to perform competence because the competence was simply assumed. He introduced himself as Chief Analyst Wren. He also ran scans. He also ran them twice. He also left without saying anything. The third scientist who arrived did not introduce herself at all. She stood outside the marked separation line and looked at her screen and looked at me and looked at her screen again. Then she said quietly, "The way you say something to yourself when you forget you are not alone. This is not possible." "What is not?" I asked. She looked up. She had forgotten she was not alone. "The dormancy markers," she said. Then she caught herself, straightened, and said, "Someone will be in to speak with you shortly," and left. Dormancy markers. I filed that phrase. Owen had once told me, during one of the longer maintenance rotations we had shared, that the reason humans had never been taken seriously by the wider galactic community was simple mathematics. Humans lived a century at most. Valdesi lived thousands of years. In a civilization that measured contribution by the arc of a life, humans were footnotes, brief, bright, and gone. I had never argued with him. He was not wrong about the math. But there is something nobody thinks to ask about brief things. What were they before they became brief? Chief Analyst Wren returned 4 hours later. He was not alone. 3 other scientists came with him, all carrying independent monitoring equipment, all moving with the careful posture of people entering a room they had been told to treat with caution. They ran more scans. Different equipment this time. The interface design had the particular functional plainness of tools that had been in service for a very long time because nothing newer had been needed. Until now. Wren sat down across from me. He placed his screen on the table between us, turned so I could see the readings if I chose to look. I looked. I do not have sufficient background in Valdesi biological classification to decode every symbol on that screen, but I had spent 3 years learning their written language, and numbers are numbers in any system, and some of the numbers on that screen were old. Very old. Old in the way that geological records are old. Old in the way that makes everything built on top of them feel recent. "I want to ask you some questions," Wren said. "All right," I said. "Has anything like this happened before? Any incident involving energy discharge, electronic disruption, or unexpected physical response that you could not explain?" I thought about it honestly. "The relay coupling," I said. "When I was 22, I grounded a live relay coupling without insulation, full charge, close range. My supervisor said it should have stopped my heart. And it did not." He made a note. "Any others?" I thought about the wedding, the sensor drones, the translator bead. "Small things," I said. "Electronics behaving oddly around me. I always thought it was the nature of the work. I spend a lot of time near high-voltage systems." "How long have you and your wife been together?" 4 years, including the engagement period. 3 years married." He made another note. He made it with the deliberate care of someone writing something they believe will eventually matter. "Your biometric readings," he said, "show what our classification system calls a dormancy sequence. It is a genetic marker profile indicating a state of biological potential that has not been activated." He paused. "We have a theoretical framework for this profile. It was developed 800 years ago, based on analysis of very old samples, very old and very human." I said nothing. I was listening. "The theory, and I want to emphasize that until your readings, this was considered historical speculation, not active science, is that the human genome contains coding that was placed there intentionally. Not evolved, placed, by something older than any civilization currently active in this region of the galaxy." He stopped. "Placed for what purpose?" I asked. "The theory never established a purpose," he said. "The relevant question, as I understand it, is what triggers activation." "And the answer?" He looked at me with the expression of a scientist encountering the edge of his own understanding, and not entirely comfortable with the view from there. "The data we have suggests the trigger is relational," he said. "Extended, deeply committed relational bonding with another being, not temporary attachment, not surface connection, the kind that rewires behavioral architecture, that creates new neural pathways, that causes one organism to reorganize its basic functioning around another. He looked at his screen. In simpler terms, the kind of relationship where you start learning someone's language without meaning to. The room was very quiet. "How long have you spoken Valdesi?" he asked. "Since about 6 months into the engagement," I said. Nobody in the room wrote that down. It was the kind of fact that was too strange for the standard form. Ren gathered his equipment. He told me someone would return to speak with me. He did not say who. 2 hours later, the door opened and the scientists left. The guard left 30 seconds after that. I was alone. For 20 minutes. Then the door opened again. The woman who entered was tall, not the low-gravity height of someone like the matriarch. This was the height of someone who simply was. She wore no uniform, no rank designation, nothing that needed to announce itself because announcing was for things that were uncertain. She was old, not visibly old in the human sense of softening and thinning. She was old in the way that stone is old, dense, contained, all the erosion long since finished. Her eyes were the deep amber of aged Valdesi who have lived past 5,000 years. The color came from a cellular process that accumulated slowly, the way tree rings accumulated. You could not fake it. She was the only being in the galaxy with eyes that exact shade. Queen Varel of the Valdesi Eternal Court, sovereign of the Imperium, 7,000 years of continuous documented history. She stood outside the marked line and looked at the readings on the screen she carried. Then she looked at me. "How long?" she asked the empty room. There was no one there to answer but me. "How long what?" I asked. "How long since activation began?" I thought about the wedding, the sensor drones, the coupling incident before that, the translator bead. "I think pieces of it have been running for a while," I said, "but the main event seems fairly recent." She was quiet. She looked at her screen again. Something moved through her expression, something that did not have a common name. 7,000 years produces expressions that way. "Leave us," she said. There was no one in the room to leave, but the 2 recording systems, I could not see both shut off. I heard the precise click of the hidden ventilation grill near the view panel closing. She sat down. I had not expected that. I watched her settle into the seat across from me with the careful deliberateness of someone choosing to make themselves equal, and I understood that this was a significant gesture from someone who had not made a gesture like it in a very long time. "You are not angry," she said. "Not a question." "No," I said. "Why not?" I thought about Sarah, about the soup that tasted like my childhood built from completely different materials, about the ceiling panel she kept defending out of pure stubbornness, about 6 fingers closing around mine in the orbital garden under real stars, about 3 years of someone filling every room she walked into. "I have something to get back to," I said. "You are between me and it. That is the whole situation." She looked at me for a long time. The eternal queen of the Valdesi Imperium, 7,000 years of history in her face, sat across from me in a containment room. Then she sat back. "The arranged union," she said. "With General Kiev, you know about it." "I read the classification tag on the summons," I said. "It predates your wife's birth by 200 years. It is a political arrangement of significant value to 3 separate Valdesi administrative territories." "I understand," I said. "Do you?" "Yes," I said. "You built a system that plans 2 centuries ahead. Someone chose differently. The system needs adjusting. You are trying to figure out if the adjustment costs more than the original plan." She said nothing. "The answer is yes," I said. "Whatever this is that your scientists found, and I do not fully understand it yet, but I will, the cost of continuing the original plan is higher than you think. Not because of me, because of what I represent if their theory is correct. I looked at her. I am not the only human in a long-term bond with a non-human, not close to the only one. If the trigger is relational and the dormancy is real and the coding is in every human genome. I let her finish the thought herself. She was 7,000 years old. She did not need my help finishing thoughts. She stood. She smoothed the fabric of her outer garment with the unhurried deliberateness of someone making a decision they will not change. I am going to need to speak with my court, she said. Before you do, I said, where is my wife? The queen looked at me. Something in her expression recalibrated. She has not been harmed, she said. That is not what I asked. She is in the Eastern Review Hall, she said. She is waiting. Then so am I said. The queen left. I sat back. 48 ceiling tiles. 36 floor panels. 7 ventilation grilles. I could wait. They brought Sarah to me that evening. Not the other way around. They brought her to the containment suite, which by then had been reclassified 3 times in the administrative system and currently existed under a designation that did not have a standard translation. I had checked. She walked in and looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said anything for a moment, because there was too much of the right kind of nothing to fill the space. Then she sat down and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the sensor drones at the wedding, about the relay coupling incident at 22, about the years of small electronics failing and resetting around me that I had always attributed to the nature of the work, about the corridor, the escort, the stunner, the lights. I told her about the scans, about Wren's theory, about the dormancy sequence and the old placed coding and the relational trigger. She listened the way she listened to everything, completely, without interrupting, storing it in the careful architecture of her thinking. When I finished, she was quiet. "How long have you known about the language?" she asked. "Since about 6 months in," I said. "I did not plan it. I just listened to you and it went in and stayed." "You never said." "There was never a reason to." "There were many reasons." "There were many reasons not to," I said. "You had enough complicated things in your life. A human husband who was picking up Valdesi dialects without formal training would have added to the list." She looked at me with that expression, the one that meant I was right about something in the worst possible way. "My mother knew," she said, "at the wedding when you responded to her." "Yes." She told the court. "I figured." "Is that why you checked the summons classification?" "No," I said. "I checked because something was wrong and you were not telling me what. The matriarch was not the reason. You were." She looked down at her hands. 6 fingers, all of them, folded together the way she folded them when she was working through something that had more pieces than the surface suggested. "I have known something was different about you since before the engagement," she said. "Not the language, something else. The way systems behave around you. The way people respond when you walk into a room even when you are saying nothing. The way you always know where the exits are without looking for them." She paused. "I thought I was imagining it." "You were not imagining it." "No," she said, "I was not." Outside the containment suite, the Valdesi Eternal Court was in emergency session. I knew this because the ambient noise of the hub had changed in the way that ambient noise changes when a large administrative body starts moving fast. I had been listening to it for an hour. "What does the Queen do now?" Sarah asked. "I think she already knows," I said. "She is not deciding what to do. She is deciding how to frame what she has already decided." "Which is?" "She files it, classifies it high enough that it will not be touched for a generation or 2, buys herself time to understand what it means before anyone else has to." Sarah considered this. "She is 7,000 years old," she said. "She knows how to be patient." "Yes," I said. "That is exactly the problem for anyone who tries to rush her." She almost smiled. In the morning, Chief Analyst Wren came back. He had slept, and it showed the particular sharpened focus of someone who had been turning a problem over all night and arrived at the point where the problem stops being frightening and starts being interesting. He asked if I would be willing to answer further questions. I said yes on two conditions. First, Sarah stayed in the room. Second, the answers went into a file that neither of us would need to think about for at least 200 years. He agreed to both without hesitation, which told me the Queen had already given him those terms before she sent him. I answered everything completely, without filtering. When he asked how long I had been learning Valdisi, I said what I had said before. I do not know exactly. I think it started when she laughed the first time. The sounds went in and stayed. Wren looked at me. He looked at Sarah. He did not write that down. Some data is too strange for the standard form, and he was wise enough to know it. The session lasted 3 hours. At the end of it, Wren said, "The General's arranged union will be dissolved. This will take approximately 6 days of administrative processing." He said it to the room. Administrative neutrality. I respected it. Sarah said, "Thank you." Wren left. We were given real quarters, a proper room with a window that showed the actual hub exterior instead of a rendered landscape. I stood at that window for a while and looked at the scale of the station, corridors wide enough to fit entire city blocks inside them. Transit bays moving vessels the size of office buildings. The structural geometry of something built across centuries by a civilization that thought in centuries. Sarah came and stood beside me. "It is a lot to take in," she said. "I have been taking it in since we arrived," I said. "I have a fairly complete structural inventory of this hub." She looked at me sideways. "Do you always do that?" "Count things? Yes, since I was 9. "Why 9? I had not told her this. I had never told anyone this. "My father died when I was 9, I said. "Car accident. I was in the car. I was fine. I do not know how. After that I started counting exits, structural load points, weak spots, ways out. I looked at the hub outside the window. I have never been able to stop." She was quiet. She did not say she was sorry. She knew better than that. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "The scar," she said. I put my hand over hers. "Yes," I said. "Tell me." I told her. It was a short story and a long one at the same time. A 16-year-old in the wrong place at the wrong moment. A structure that should have crushed him and somehow did not. The scar running from his left shoulder to the center of his chest that no doctor ever fully accounted for. The ones who called it a miracle and moved on because they did not have a category for what they had seen. A dormancy sequence that had been running quietly since birth, buying time, waiting for the right person to walk through the right door. She touched the scar once lightly, and then placed her palm flat against it the way you press your hand against something you want to understand completely. "All this time," she said. "All this time," I said. We left 2 days later. The transit back was a standard commercial carrier, nothing special, the kind that hauled trade representatives and visiting academics and the occasional diplomatic attaché across the system. Nobody paid us any attention. I had our wristbands off within an hour of boarding, mine in particular. I folded it and dropped it in the disposal unit and did not think about the color again. Owen met us at the Relay 7 dock. He had the look of someone who had been running parallel worry tracks since our departure and was managing the relief of our return by finding something practical to focus on immediately. "The pressure system on 4 Gamma went down 2 days ago," he said, before either of us had fully stepped off the gangway. "I saw the report," I said. "I filed a repair sequence before we left. The secondary coupling should have held." "It held," he said, "mostly. I will look at it tomorrow." He looked at me, then at Sarah. Then at the general condition of us, which probably communicated several things he had the wisdom not to ask about in a dock corridor. Right, he said, dinner first. Dinner first, I agreed. We ate in the common room of the residential platform. Owen made the thing he called soup, that was technically more of a general accommodation for several different types of edible material sharing a bowl. It was good the way honest and unpretentious things are good. We did not tell Owen everything. We told him enough. He listened the same way he always listened, carefully, without performing shock, occasionally looking at the middle distance with the expression of a man quietly updating his understanding of the world. When we finished, he was quiet for a moment. So, he said, you are some kind of what? A living relay station. I do not know yet what I am, I said. But the Valdisi queen sat down. She did. Owen nodded slowly. I have met a Valdisi dignitary twice in my life, he said. Neither time did any furniture move. He picked up his bowl. I am going to need some time with this. Take as long as you need, I said. He went to do the dishes. Sarah went to find the tools she had left in the side room before we departed. I sat at the kitchen table. The ceiling panel above me was still there, the one we had been arguing about for 3 years, the hairline fracture in the third tile from the left. You had to know where to look. I had always known where to look. I got up and found my repair kit in the lower cabinet. I took out the tools I needed. I climbed up on the step platform and got to work. 12 minutes, done properly. When I came down, Sarah was standing in the doorway watching. You fixed it, she said. It needed fixing, I said. She looked at the ceiling panel, at me, at the tools in my hand. I know, she said. The first time she had admitted it. I put the tools away. We sat together in the kitchen for a while, the way you sit when a lot has happened and most of it has not finished settling, and you are not in any rush to make it settle. There were things I had not said, and things she had not said, and some of them would take years to find the right moment for. That was all right. We had time. Across the galaxy, the Eternal Court's emergency session had closed. Queen Varel had personally filed the biological classification report under a restriction level that would not be reviewed for 200 years. It was not a cover-up. It was a breath, a pause. A 7,000-year-old woman who had mastered patience as a survival skill, deciding that some things were better understood slowly, with room to think. The records, the scans, the readings, the notes that Wren had been too careful to write down were sealed. The arranged union between General Kiev and the third daughter of the first house was dissolved by administrative order. 6 pages of paperwork. No ceremony. No explanation beyond the legal minimum. Kiev received the news in his command quarters and said nothing. He was a general. He understood the reallocation of resources. Matriarch Theva had been informed via official communiqué. I did not know what she said when she read it. I did not need to know. Somewhere in the hub's analysis division, Dr. Venrel was sitting in her office with a blank report screen and the complete record of what her scans had found, and she was thinking about what to do with the knowledge that humans, brief, century-spanning humans who fixed relay stations and argued about ceiling panels, had been coded for something vast by something older than any of them. She would think about it for a long time. She would not be the last. There were others, not many, scattered across the systems in ones and twos, in small apartments and shared workspaces and long transit corridors. There were humans who had been in the right kind of relationship for the right length of time, who had learned someone else's language without trying, who had caused electronics to stutter and lights to flutter, who had walked away from things that should not have been survivable and told themselves it was luck and moved on. They had all, without exception, found an easier explanation. They were going to stop being able to do that. Not today, not for a long time, but eventually the sealed file would be opened. Eventually Wren's unwritten notes would find their way into the record. Eventually, some analyst 2 centuries from now would see the same readings in a scan and know exactly what they meant, because the first case had already been documented, locked away, waiting with the patience of something that had already waited long enough to know how. I did not think about any of this that night. I sat in my kitchen on Relay 7 with my wife and the fixed ceiling panel, and the sound of Owen doing dishes badly in the next room, and I looked at Sarah's hands where they rested on the table between us. She turned her palm up. I put mine in it. 6 fingers closed around my hand, all the warmth of it, all the particular and specific gravity of it. The thing that had started a sequence running in my genome without asking permission, and apparently decided that 4 centuries was not such a large difference after all, given the right circumstances. Hell of a thing. I thought it and did not say it. Some things you keep for yourself. The lights in the kitchen hummed steadily. No flicker, no reset, everything exactly where it was supposed to be. For now,